Have you ever wondered why someone would choose the dangerous life of a pirate? Was it just for treasure and adventure? The real story is far more complex and surprising. It's a story of desperation, revolution, and the creation of a society far more democratic than any on land. Forget the Hollywood glamour. Today, we're diving deep into the true history of the golden age of piracy. Imagine this: you're walking home from a tavern in 18th century London or Bristol. Suddenly a group of men grab you. They're the press gang, a naval recruitment squad with the full authority of the crown. You're dragged aboard a Royal Navy warship, and just like that, your old life is over. This was the brutal reality for tens of thousands of men. Life as a common sailor was a nightmare. You'd face the constant threat of the cat-o'-nine-tails. For the smallest mistake, your food would be infested with weevils, and your pay. It was often delayed for years, or never came at all. The mortality rate from disease and accidents was staggering. You were essentially a prisoner, serving an indefinite sentence on a floating hell. When you compare this to the life of a pirate, suddenly the choice doesn't seem so crazy. Piracy wasn't just about greed. For many, it was the only path to freedom. It was a desperate gamble, but a gamble for a life you could actually call your own. But where did this idea of a brotherhood of rebels come from? To find the answer, we have to travel back before the Golden Age, to the shores of Hispaniola, the island that is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic. In the untamed wilderness lived a group of rugged outcasts known as the Boucaniers. These were French hunters living off the land, smoking wild game on wooden frames called boucans. They were rough men, driven from their homes by poverty and persecution, but living in this harsh environment, they learned something crucial. Survival depended on cooperation. They banded together, forming small communities based on trust and mutual defense against Spanish patrols who saw them as trespassers. They called themselves the Brethren of the Coast. They shared everything: their food, their resources, and eventually their plunder when they took to the sea. This was the seed of the pirate brotherhood. It wasn't born from a desire for chaos, but from a need for community. These were the first pirates, and their principles of equality and shared risk would lay the foundation for a maritime revolution. Now let's talk about one of the most radical documents of the 18th century. No, it's not the Constitution. It's the Pirate Articles of Agreement. Every pirate crew, before setting sail, would draw up their own set of rules, their own constitution. And every single man, from the captain to the lowest deckhand, had to sign or make his mark on it. Think about that. On a naval ship, the captain was a tyrant with the power of life and death. On a pirate ship, the captain was elected. He could be voted out of his job if the crew wasn't happy. The articles spelled out everything with incredible clarity. How would the loot be divided? Every man got a share. The captain and quartermaster might get 2 shares or 1.5, but everyone was guaranteed a piece of the prize. What happened if you were injured? The articles had a system of workers' compensation. Lose an arm in battle, you'd get a hefty payout from the ship's common fund before the rest of the loot was divided. This was unheard of back on land. This wasn't anarchy. This was a floating republic, a social experiment where every man had a voice, a vote, and a right to fair treatment. It was a society more just and equitable than the empires they were preying upon. Finally, let's talk about the most iconic symbol of piracy, the Jolly Roger. That black flag, with the skull and crossbones, wasn't just a cool design. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Imagine you're a merchant captain, sailing through the Caribbean. You see a ship approaching. At first, it might be flying a friendly flag, maybe the English or French colors to get close. Then, at the last moment, they haul it down and raise the black flag. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The skull was a universal symbol of death. Sometimes they added other symbols to make it even more frightening. An hourglass to show your time was running out, a bleeding heart to show no mercy would be given, or a skeleton holding a spear. This flag was a brand. It sent a clear message. Surrender now, and you might be spared. Fight, and you will all die. The goal wasn't to fight a bloody battle. Battles were risky and could damage the ship and its precious cargo. The ideal pirate attack was one where no shots were fired. The Jolly Roger was so effective at inspiring fear that many ships would surrender the moment they saw it. It was a weapon of terror, a tool that allowed pirates to win their prize through intimidation alone, saving powder, shot, and lives on both sides. So, the next time you see a pirate in a movie, remember the real story. Remember the press-gang sailor yearning for freedom, the buccaneer forging a brotherhood in the wilderness, the crewman voting for his captain, and the terrifying genius of the Jolly Roger. The golden age of piracy was a short, violent chapter in history, but it was also a story of rebellion against tyranny and a search for a fairer way of life, even if it was on the wrong side of the law. It's a reminder that sometimes the most fascinating histories are hidden just beneath the surface of the myths we think we know. Last time, we explored the rise of these legendary figures. Now, it's time to visit their capital, the most notorious city in the Caribbean, Nassau. Imagine a place beyond the reach of kings and empires, a fortified town teeming with thousands of the world's most wanted outlaws. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a self-governing republic, a pirate utopia. In the early 1700s, Nassau was the epicenter of a new world order, governed not by laws but by liberty, loyalty, and the pursuit of plunder. Taverns overflowed with rum and stolen wine, the streets buzzed with tales of daring raids, and every ship in the harbor flew the black flag. How did this chaotic, vibrant society function? It ran on a shared dream of freedom and a mutual understanding that every man and woman was equal. This was the beating heart of the pirate world, a place where legends were born and fortunes were spent as quickly as they were made. But what exactly was this fortune they were all chasing? The answer lies with the Spanish Main. To understand the golden age of piracy, you have to follow the money. And the money, my friends, was flowing in a massive, glittering river of gold and silver. For centuries, the Spanish Empire had been extracting unimaginable wealth from its colonies in the New World. Massive treasure fleets, or flotas, would gather in ports like Havana and Cartagena, their hulls groaning under the weight of silver from the mines of Potosi and gold from the Aztec and Incan lands. These galleons were floating banks, lumbering across the Atlantic on a predictable schedule. For an ambitious pirate, this treasure fleet wasn't just a target, it was their entire reason for being. It was the jackpot, the ultimate prize that fueled their entire enterprise. Every coin that passed through Nassau, every drop of rum purchased, every cannonball bought, was paid for with wealth torn from the grasp of the Spanish Empire. Capturing even a single treasure ship could set a crew up for life. The pirates were sharks, and the Spanish Main was their feeding ground. Now you might be picturing massive pirate galleons with dozens of cannons, blasting ships to splinters like in the movies. But the reality was far more clever and efficient. Forget the Hollywood broadsides. The real tools of the trade were all about speed, surprise, and shock. The preferred vessel of the Golden Age pirate was the sloop. These ships were small, fast, and incredibly nimble. They could navigate shallow waters where larger naval warships couldn't follow, allowing for quick escapes. And when it came to combat, their secret weapon wasn't a huge cannon, but the swivel gun. These were smaller cannons mounted on the ship's railing that could be aimed by a single person. They were loaded with grape shot, a cluster of small metal balls that would shred sails and sweep the decks of enemy sailors, causing chaos and panic. Once the enemy was softened up, the pirates would close in, toss grappling hooks, and swarm the other vessel. Their goal wasn't to sink the ship, it was to capture it and its cargo intact. Boarding axes, pistols, and cutlasses were the instruments of this terrifying close-quarters fight. It was a strategy of maritime predators. Get in fast, hit hard, and be gone before the Navy even knew what happened. Life in the Pirate Republic was built on a code of conduct, a set of articles that every crew member agreed to. It was a surprisingly democratic system that guaranteed a fair share of the plunder and established rules for life aboard the ship. But what happened when a pirate broke that code? What happened when one of them betrayed their brothers? Justice among thieves was swift, and often it was brutal. For the most serious offenses, like cheating a crewmate or deserting in battle, the ultimate punishment was marooning. This was a fate many considered worse than death. The offender would be taken to a deserted island or a desolate sandbar, a place with no hope of rescue. They were left with nothing but the clothes on their back, a flask of water, some gunpowder, and a single pistol loaded with a single shot. The choice was theirs. Starve to death slowly under the blazing sun, or take the quick way out. Marooning was a chilling reminder that even in a society of outlaws, there were lines you did not cross. It was the dark side of their utopia, a testament to the harsh realities that governed their fragile republic of thieves. Their freedom was absolute, but the price of betraying it was the ultimate isolation. And that, for now, concludes our deep dive into the world of these legendary sea rovers. From their bustling capital to their brutal justice, the golden age of piracy was a complex and fascinating chapter in history. An idea of a free republic, a pirate utopia. You don't fight it with cannonballs alone. The British Empire, in a stroke of genius, unsheathed its cleverest weapon, the King's pardon. Imagine this. You're a pirate, living under the constant threat of the noose. Suddenly a piece of paper arrives from the most powerful man in the world, the King of England. It offers you a full pardon. All your crimes forgiven, a clean slate. All you have to do is renounce your life of piracy. This wasn't just an offer of clemency, it was a psychological masterstroke. It was an offer designed to sow discord, to break the bonds of brotherhood that held the pirate republic together. For many pirates, the offer was too good to refuse. They had made their fortunes. They were tired of the constant danger. Why not cash out and live a quiet life? But for others, this was a betrayal. It was selling out the very principles they fought for. Suddenly, the once united pirate community was fractured. Former allies looked at each other with suspicion. Those who accepted the pardon were seen as traitors by the hardliners who refused to bow to the crown. The pardon created a civil war within the pirate world, turning brother against brother. This was the beginning of the end for their republic, not with a bang, but with the whisper of a promise. The Empire had found the pirates' weak spot, and they were pressing it hard. With the pirates divided and weakened, the Empire struck back with overwhelming force. And the man they chose to lead the charge was no stranger to the sea's brutal ways, Woodes Rogers. A former privateer himself, Rogers knew exactly how pirates thought and fought. He was appointed the new governor of the Bahamas, the very heart of the pirate republic, with a clear mission: crush the pirate threat once and for all. Rogers arrived in Nassau not just with warships, but with the authority of the King's pardon in one hand and a sword in the other. He offered one last chance for surrender. Many took it, but the most defiant, the most legendary pirates refused to bend the knee. This ignited one of the greatest manhunts in maritime history. The Royal Navy, guided by Rogers' strategy and fueled by former pirates who had turned informants, began to systematically hunt down the remaining pirate captains. And at the top of their list was the most feared pirate of all, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. The campaign to find him was relentless. Finally, in November 1718, Lieutenant Robert Maynard cornered Blackbeard at Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. The battle that followed was the stuff of legend. It wasn't a grand naval engagement. It was a vicious, close-quarters brawl on the deck of Blackbeard's ship. Blackbeard fought like a demon, taking by some accounts 5 pistol shots and over 20 sword cuts before he finally fell. His death sent a shockwave through the pirate world. If Blackbeard could be killed, no one was safe. The Empire was not just winning, it was making a statement. And that statement became even more terrifying. For the pirates who were captured, there would be no more pardons. The era of mercy was over. What followed were mass trials and executions, a grim spectacle designed to stamp out the last embers of the pirate rebellion. In places like Jamaica, Virginia, and South Carolina, courts worked overtime, sentencing dozens of pirates to death. But the Empire's final act of psychological warfare was the most gruesome of all. The bodies of executed pirates, like the infamous Captain Kidd and Calico Jack Rackham, weren't simply buried. They were placed in iron cages called gibbets, and hung from prominent points along major waterways and harbour entrances. Imagine sailing into port and the first thing you see is the decaying body of a famous pirate swaying in the wind. This was the gibbet, a horrific, silent warning to all who might dream of a life of freedom on the high seas. The message was clear. This is the price of rebellion. This is how the Empire deals with those who defy it. The dream of a pirate republic was officially dead, hanging in an iron cage for all the world to see. So with their republic shattered and their leaders executed, the golden age of piracy came to a violent end. But did the idea die with them? Why, centuries later, are we still so fascinated by these 18th century criminals? Why do pirates still capture our imagination as symbols of freedom and rebellion? The answer lies in the stories that came after. The legend of the pirate began almost as soon as the last one was hanged. Think about it. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published over 150 years later, cemented the iconic image of the pirate we know today. The peg leg, the parrot on the shoulder, the buried treasure map. This romanticized version transformed brutal thieves into adventurous anti-heroes. From there, Hollywood took the baton and ran with it. From Errol Flynn's swashbuckling heroics to the charismatic chaos of Captain Jack Sparrow, cinema has continuously polished the pirate myth. These characters aren't just criminals, they are masters of their own destiny, living by their own code, free from the boring rules of society. They represent a fantasy of ultimate liberty. The ghost of the pirate republic continues to sail through our culture, a timeless symbol of defiance against authority. They remind us of a time when a small group of outcasts dared to challenge the most powerful empires on earth and, for a brief, shining moment, create their own world. The pirate in our imagination isn't just a historical figure, it's the part of us that dreams of adventure, that bristles against injustice, and that yearns to be free. And that is why their flag, the Jolly Roger, still flies high in the pages of history and in our collective imagination. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible voyage through the real history of pirates. It's been an amazing journey to share with you all. If you enjoyed this series, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next historical adventure. We'll see you in the next video.